วัสดีค่ะ
สวัสดีครับ
A very good morning and warm welcome to Bangkok Fintech Fair 2018. This year is under the theme of SME and Consumer Financial Solutions.
ขอต้อนรับแขกผู้มีเกียรติทุกท่านเข้าสู่งาน Bangkok Fintech Fair 2018 ณ อาคารศูนย์การเรียนรู้ธนาคารแห่งประเทศไทยครับ ผมนายอัธกรเทพมงคลรับหน้าที่เป็นพิธีกรงานในวันนี้ครับ
This is the very first time that the Bank of Thailand has ever organized this type of fintech events, especially at this place, our newly opened learning center, which was our banknote printing plants for almost 40 long years. I am Wichit Lekha Marom and will be your host for these two-day events.
และงานในวันนี้ครับถูกจัดขึ้นเพื่อสร้างการรับรู้ด้านฟินเทคแก่ผู้บริโภครวมไปถึงแสดงศักยภาพและนวัตกรรมทางการเงินของผู้ให้บริการด้านฟินเทคครับ
The main objectives of this fintech fair are creating awareness of fintech opportunities for SMEs and consumers, together with showing the potential of fintech innovations from financial service providers.
งานในวันนี้ครับจะไม่สามารถเกิดขึ้นได้เลยครับถ้าเกิดไม่ได้รับความร่วมมือจากหน่วยงานภาครัฐสถาบันการเงินผู้ให้บริการชำระเงินบริษัทด้านเทคโนโลยีและบริษัทด้านฟินเทคครับ
So we would like to express our appreciation to our strategic partners for making this event happen. There are three main stages during these two-day events. The sessions in this main conference hall will be Facebook Live, on Facebook Live of the Bank of Thailand page, and it will also be broadcasted to Technology Talk and Cybersecurity Talk areas on the first and second floor.
ภายในงานนะครับถูกแบ่งออกเป็น3เวทีด้วยกันครับเวทีแรกครับคือเวทีหลักหรือเวทีที่เราอยู่ณห้องแห่งนี้ครับเวทีที่2ครับคือเวทีด้านความปลอดภัยทางไซเบอร์บริเวณชั้น2ครับและเวทีสุดท้ายครับเวทีด้านเทคโนโลยีบริเวณชั้น1ครับโดยงานเสวนาในเวทีหลักช่วงเช้านี้จะถูกถ่ายทอดสดไปอีกทั้ง2เวทีครับและยังถ่ายทอดสดผ่าน Facebook Live ตลอดทั้งงานครับ
So in these events, there are many interesting exhibition booths from our partners. So you'll find showcases of innovative financial products and services from fintech players waiting for you to visit.
สำหรับรายละเอียดตารางเวลาหรือเอกสารประกอบการเสวนาง่ายมากครับเพียงแค่ท่านยกมือถือนะครับขึ้นมาสแกน QR code ที่อยู่บนหน้าจอในขณะนี้ครับเพื่อดาวน์โหลดแอปพลิเคชัน BOT Event เท่านี้ก็สามารถเข้าถึงข้อมูลทั้งหมดได้แล้วครับ
So all information about this fintech fair will be available for you on the BOT Events application, which you can easily download it by scanning the QR code being shown on the screen right now.
และเพื่อความปลอดภัยนะครับสำหรับกรณีเกิดเหตุฉุกเฉินขอให้ทุกท่านเดินทางออกนอกตัวอาคารครับโดยใช้ทางออกหนีไฟที่ใกล้ที่สุดบริเวณด้านซ้ายด้านขวาและด้านหน้าซึ่งสังเกตได้จากป้ายทางออกสีเขียวเมื่อท่านเดินทางออกนอกห้องนี้ครับและก็สามารถใช้บันไดทางปกติเพื่อออกนอกตัวอาคารก็ได้เช่นกันครับสำหรับข้อสอบถามเพิ่มเติมนะครับรบกวนติดต่อเคาน์เตอร์ประชาสัมพันธ์บริเวณชั้น1และชั้น5ด้านหน้างานนี้เองครับ
For safety instructions in case of any emergencies, please follow the green exit signs. Take staircases down to the first floor to exit the building. So, since we are gathering here at the FinTech Fair, have you ever thought how much FinTech can do for you? Well, if you cannot imagine, let's take this journey together.
เชิญชมรับฟังครับ
Have you ever thought how you could change the world? Change the way we do business? Change the way we live our lives? Are we ready for these disruptive changes? Do we need more collaboration, better infrastructure, greater security, or faster access? The answer to these questions is FinTech. FinTech has high potential and can provide various opportunities for both consumers and service providers. For instance, standardized QR codes that are compatible with international standard EMV code, together with common business rules, can facilitate interoperability among service providers and maximize the e-payment accessibility of SMEs and retail consumers. More importantly, payment data reflecting real spending behavior of consumers and actual income flows of businesses can be used to unlock additional financial services. The current technological stage of biometrics provides much better authentication accuracy than typical usernames and passwords, resulting in lower rates of false authentication. it can be applied to biopayment, a convenient and secured payment scheme. Standard APIs connect fintech players together to exchange data and processing upon the same standard and reduce implementation costs with greater security. Fintech also promotes the ease of access to financial services. eKYC opens the doorway to digital banking services, using innovative identification and trusted verification to provide services anytime, anywhere, and on any device. Digital identity for eKYC is a secured mechanism for consumers, reducing fraud and enhancing AML/CFT. Amid a rapidly changing financial landscape, data is worth more than gold and can increase productivity and efficiency of businesses. Machine learning and artificial intelligence is used to analyze patterns of data beyond the capability of traditional analysis, so we can make predictions, ranging from the likelihood of a certain behavior to a particular incident. The emerging approach of alternative credit scoring and information-based lending can help consumers access funding to better serve their needs. Data within supply chain businesses can be collected to provide enhanced and seamless financial solutions which are embedded in their business routines. Blockchain, or distributed ledger technology, DLT, provides a distributed and replicated system with the capabilities of immutability, transparency, availability, auditability, and resilience to attack. The more participants in the network, the more benefit we gain from blockchain. It has introduced a sharing platform that reduces roles of intermediaries. Digital assets can be distributed and shared on blockchain to ensure authenticity and security. For SMEs and retail consumers, opportunities and potential with advanced productive technologies are crucial, as they could help elevate the competitiveness of businesses and our country as a whole. Now that we see opportunities, we are determined to make changes for the better. We realize the potential of new technologies. We know how to do business and live our lives in this disruptive environment. Now it is time for us to change our world.
Okay, now we can see how much fintech can do for us. It provides great opportunities and potential, together with financial inclusion, with efficiency and productivity. So next, I would like to invite the Bank of Thailand's Governor, Dr. Weerathai Santiprapop, to deliver the keynote speech. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Mr. Governor.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Sawadee Krab. A very, very good morning to you all. Welcome to the inaugural Bangkok Fintech Fair, and welcome to the Bank of Thailand Learning Center. This learning center was first opened to the public in December of last year. It is not only Bangkok's newest learning center and public library, but also an open space for individuals and entrepreneurs to collaborate and exchange ideas. So it is fitting that our very first Bangkok Fintech Fair is held here at this venue. Over the next 2 days, we will be joined by some of the top minds of Thailand's fintech and financial industry, as well as regional and global leaders in financial innovation. The main discussion panels will present various issues surrounding fintech ecosystem with the focus on SME financial solutions, retail payments, and technology infrastructure. The cybersecurity room, which is held in the library, will underscore the importance of cyber awareness and highlight key security issues, ranging from emerging threats to defensive strategies. And the technology talk room and various presentation booths all over the venue will showcase some of the latest technologies and initiatives Thailand's fintech and financial industries are working on. Ladies and gentlemen, on the program, this morning I'm supposed to talk about Bank of Thailand's policies direction on fintech development. Before I do so, I would like to take a step back and focus on 3 key words, which I believe are imperative for formulating financial sector policy for Thailand and the region as a whole. These 3 keywords are productivity, immunity, and inclusivity. First, an emphasis must be placed on productivity, as uplifting productivity is a critical requirement for long-term growth of an economy. For one, at current stage, many countries in our regions are facing structural transformations of aging workforce. Shrinking workforce can dampen long-term growth prospects. We must become more productive in order to increase output level and improve standard of living of our people. Productivity is also needed to boost competitiveness of businesses, expanding global trade network, and emergence of large e-business platforms have introduced new competitors into our business landscape. Moreover, roles of banks could be challenged as sharing financial platforms gain prominence in the modern economy, and new fintech firms offer financial products unbundled from the long-standing value chain of banking. Without meaningful adjustment that is improving productivity, long-term growth potential of an economy could deteriorate. Second, immunity becomes imperative in the current global economic landscape. We are living in a time of changes where outcomes can be abrupt, unpredictable, and volatile. Amidst the fallout from the global financial crisis of 2008, where unconventional monetary policies flushed global financial market with excess liquidity, we are now entering the cycle where major central banks have started normalizing their monetary policies. Along the normalization path, one should expect to see market corrections and volatile asset prices. On top of this, rising U.S. trade protectionism has raised concerns over global trade, investment, and production, and further measures could be retaliated. Global warming and geopolitical risks also increase in many regions of the world. Besides, rapidly changing technology could be disruptive for incumbents in many industries and also bring new forms of risks ranging from cyber threats to strategic risks of existing business models. All these uncertainties necessitate that building sufficient immunity becomes a key consideration in any financial sector policy. Third is the notion of inclusivity. We need to understand that any financial sector policy without considerations for inclusivity cannot be sustained. This is especially important for Thailand and many countries in our region, where income and wealth inequality is one of the most pressing social and economic issues. Any policy or action that does not pay attention to the issue of inequality threatens long-term social and economic stability, as those with higher capital can more easily reap benefits from economic growth and new technology, leaving those without access to new technology or know-how further behind. Eventually, inequality in income, wealth, and opportunity can raise social polarization, resulting in political gridlocks as seen in many countries. Ultimately, policies that make improvements in all of these three key imperatives can uplift the real economy and standard of living of people. Productive financial sector allows for more efficient resource allocations among different segments of the economy. Maintaining a resilient financial system allows for smooth functioning of the financial markets and keep systemic risks at bay. And an inclusive financial system ensures that the benefits from economic growth can be shared fairly across the whole society, fostering stable social and economic environment conducive for sustainable growth. Ladies and gentlemen, amidst the rapidly changing technology, fintech can be and must be an instrumental driver of financial sector policy to fulfill the three key imperatives of productivity, immunity, and inclusivity. On productivity front, fintech can enhance efficiency in financial services. Rise of new electronic payment ecosystem can enable more efficient transfer of funds and significantly lower transaction costs for customers. Adoption of fintech platforms will allow banks to scale down on the high-cost brick-and-mortar delivery model and shift to less costly and more efficient digital services. Lending process can be made much more efficient through usage of transactional data from e-commerce and payment platforms, and banks' business model could change from collateral-based lending to information-based lending. Meanwhile, blockchain has advanced technology behind many aspects of financial services, especially back-office operations and fund transfers. All of these help lower costs of financial transactions and improve ease of doing business for banks and customers, thereby improving productivity of the economy as a whole. On immunity front, prudent applications of fintech can help banks and business improve their risk management. With the vast amount of data available, such as those from new payment ecosystem and digital transactions, banks can better analyze business conditions and make more accurate forecasts of customers' credit demand and credit risks, resulting in improved risk management model. Additionally, emergence of new data will unlock new hedging products, especially in the insurance industry. Furthermore, advancements in technologies like artificial intelligence, biometrics, and blockchains can help safeguard financial information, improve identity verification, and reduce the number and magnitude of financial frauds. These developments will contribute to safer environment for both service providers and customers. On inclusivity front, expanding fintech universe and advent of new and diverse platforms can improve financial access of customers, especially those who might have been underserved by the current financial system. As different individuals have different levels of affordability and financial requirements, the ever-expanding fintech universe can offer wide-ranging choices and solutions needed to fulfill their different needs. Digitizations of financial services and emergence of new platforms can improve financial services through online access and smartphone applications, which benefit customers both in the cities and in remote areas. Fintech applications will also help with cross-border transactions for small businesses and enable fast and cheap remittance transfer for immigrant workers, thus creating opportunities and improving the quality of life of many who might have been underserved. Meanwhile, information-based lending can help small businesses without adequate collateral gain access to funding at fair price. All of these solutions lead to lower cost of financial services greater financial access, and greater opportunity for the public. Ultimately, fintech can help unlock massive potential of our people and businesses and be a powerful tool for Thailand and developing countries to improve on productivity, immunity, and inclusivity of the financial system, as well as for the whole economy. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme of our very first Bangkok Fintech Fair focuses on SMEs and consumers, because these two groups face various challenges and can benefit greatly from the adoption of fintech. For Thailand, SMEs represent the majority of firms and make up over 80% of total employment. Many SMEs struggle to gain access to finance and payment services, which on one hand can be attributed to poor financial health due to loss of competitiveness. On the other hand, many SMEs lack financial management skills and collateral needed for funding, and the cost of finance remains high. Meanwhile, the Thai public is facing big hurdles of low long-term savings and high household debts, with Thailand having household debt to GDP ratio among the highest in the region. Many households lack access to efficient and low-cost financial services, be it deposits, payments, insurance, or credit products. These people need to be better served by our financial systems to be able to unlock their potential, improve their standard of living, and ensure their financial security as they age. Despite many challenges, I am delighted that exciting developments and initiatives are taking place here in Thailand and around the region using fintech to address these problems. Allow me to highlight some of these initiatives. We have accounting services applications for SMEs and startups on cloud platform. We have online mortgage refinancing portals that help select the best refinancing option for mortgage clients. We have real-time and low-cost cross-border money transfers and remittance platforms, biometric verifications for eKYCs to facilitate remote access to financial services, machine learning using alternative data such as social media for credit scoring, real-time invoice financing through common supply chain platforms, standardized QR code for e-payments, which has reached nearly 1 million merchants within 6 months of exiting from the Bank of Thailand's regulatory sandbox. And last but not least, PromptPay, a real-time payment infrastructure that has facilitated electronic payments for over 39 million registered IDs in Thailand. These are just some of the solutions available for SMEs and consumers in our market. To this end, I believe that over the next 2 days, we will get to see many more exciting products and projects that can inspire innovation, broaden our understanding of the current technology landscape, and help set the policy agenda for strengthening Thailand's and our region's fintech ecosystems, especially to serve SMEs and consumers. Seeing the extensive works put on by our staff and partners, and many prominent leaders and individuals in attendance this morning, make me certain that we are on the path towards fulfilling our goals. Ladies and gentlemen, to attain the overall improvement in productivity, immunity, and inclusivity, the Bank of Thailand is committed to supporting adoption of financial technology by financial institutions and promoting fintech innovation while ensuring that key risks can be contained. Throughout the next 2 days, I look forward to personally interacting with all participants to learn and find ways we can collaborate for the benefits of the Thai and regional financial industries and our fintech ecosystems. Thank you very much again for participating in our very first Bangkok Fintech Fair. I wish you all a successful and fruitful event ขอบคุณครับ
ขอบพระคุณนะครับท่านผู้ว่าการเป็นอย่างสูงครับสำหรับงานนี้นะครับนอกจากงานเสวนาแล้วนะครับเรายังมีงานนิทรรศการทางเทคโนโลยีด้านการเงินรวมไปถึงงานที่แสดงนวัตกรรมที่น่าสนใจจากทุกภาคส่วนงานครับที่รอคอยท่านอยู่แล้วณขณะนี้ครับ
So there are exhibition booths outside waiting for you to visit. We are taking a whole learning center building for the exhibitions and the panel discussions in this main conference hall. On this fifth floor, we have 4 consulting firms and the legal firm outside. On the second floor, we have our partners' booths. And on the first floor, also, we have fintech firms and tech firms. Exhibition for you to visit.
ครับและสำหรับท่านใดนะครับที่ต้องการจะส่งคำถามถึงผู้เสวนานะครับก็ง่ายมากๆครับท่านสามารถเพียงสแกน QR code ที่ขึ้นอยู่บนหน้าจอในขณะนี้ครับแล้วก็ส่งคำถามถึงผู้เสวนาได้ตลอดการเสวนาครับ
All the audience are warmly welcome to send your questions to the panelists, and the moderator will see your questions online. Then the panelists can answer all these questions after each of the panel discussion.
ลำดับต่อไปนะครับขอเรียนเชิญทุกท่านเข้าสู่งานเสวนาแรกในวันนี้ที่จะกล่าวถึงอนาคตของผู้ประกอบการ SME ในการนำนวัตกรรมและเทคโนโลยีมาประยุกต์ใช้เพื่อตอบโจทย์ธุรกิจรวมไปถึงผู้บริโภคอย่างมีประสิทธิภาพครับ
So let's get started with the first session on the future of SME financial solutions, reaping the full benefits from digital innovation. We have the head of research, IDC Financial Insights Asia Pacific, to be our moderator in this first session. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Michael Araneta.
I'm very excited to be presenting to you today and moderating what promises to be a very exciting and productive session to really talk about how we can use technology to be able to extend the potentials of SMEs in Thailand. So this session will address the key question of how the future of SME financial solutions are evolving thanks to the proper and effective use of technology. To set our discussion into context, I'll put together some of the research that IDC has come up with in the past 6 years to really address this fintech definitions, but also the fintech opportunities that we have. For quite some time, for about 6 years, we've been talking about what we call the third platform of IT. And this third platform of IT would be composed of the innovation pillars of cloud, big data analytics, social business, as well as mobility. Any new technology these days would really be primed for these 4 pillars. Recently, we've also been talking about what we call the innovation accelerators of next generation security, augmented and virtual reality, IoT, or Internet of Things, cognitive systems, robotics, as well as 3D printing. These are the foundations of the innovations that we will see moving forward as we look at productivity, inclusivity, and immunity that our dear governor earlier talked about, especially as this addresses opportunities in the SME sector. In 2018, we expect the market to really accelerate a lot of investments into these 15 technologies. There are a lot of technologies that are available out there, but if they are going to be used in conjunction with each other, they will provide great opportunities to hopefully be able to extend working capital of our SME firms, to be able to understand our customers better, and also be able to fast-track their ability to pay. These are the technologies that we think will be quite useful and quite popular in 2015, led by universal user behavior analytics, voice as a channel, next generation payments. We talked about QR standards in Thailand, but also prompt pay, robotic process automation, facial recognition, and so on. There's a lot of opportunities that we can use these technologies in the business of extending loans and finance to our SMEs. There are three big capabilities that have been facilitated by all these technologies. The first capability would that be of a greater understanding of customers. And we are saying that there has been no better time to be an SME at this point in time, because our banks are able to integrate a lot of our identities now. We also have capabilities around data augmentation to be able to use information, to be able to feed these information into our credit decisioning systems. So the information-based capabilities that was earlier talked about is already quite possible. The bank's understanding of the customer has really accelerated and scaled up significantly thanks to our work on single customer views as well as big data analytics. The second capability that has also matured would that be around of speed. The ability of our institution to respond to demand and requirements of our SME customers have also accelerated significantly thanks to real-time analytics, real-time payments, robotic process automation, or RPA. And then finally, we are moving closer and closer to the customer to extend these capabilities to our customer thanks to the creation of newer channels, whether it's the emergence of voice as a channel or digital payments also becoming quite popular. Data visualization to allow our staff and to allow our agents to be able to bring insight to the front lines. And I'm also quite pleased to note that the Bank of Thailand has started to talk about APIs since last year and will extend the number of APIs that will be facilitated in the market. This will hopefully be able to allow us to get to the new phenomenon of our time, which is that of open banking. So that contextualizes the discussion that I will lead in today's opening panel. Ultimately, we want to address how these technologies and how these new capabilities that we have built are able to bring benefits to the SME market in Thailand. For this panel, I will be joined by a distinguished set of thought leaders in our industry. This panel discussion will be participated by Matthew Saal, who is the head of digital finance at IFC. Next, we will also hear from Kun Patchara Samalapa, who is the senior executive vice president of Kasikorn Bank. Kun Sarinee Achavanuntakul, who is the co-founder and CEO of Saal Forest and a great commentator of our industry. And then last but not the least, Mr. Sopnendu Mohanty, who's the Chief FinTech Officer at the Monetary Authority of Singapore. I will ask our panelists to join me on stage. I'm sure that we're very smart people. We'll get really confused with seating. All right. Very good morning to our dear panelists. I'd like to begin this discussion by asking Matthew your thoughts on how exactly this set of digital innovations and all these technologies that are emerging are really helping the SMEs in Thailand, but also worldwide.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Great. So the digital transformation that's already affected so many of us across almost every aspect of our lives, whether we're buying things online or traveling in a car that we've summoned with an app on our phone, is now coming full force into financial services. And there's a huge opportunity for impact, as the governor and Michael, you mentioned. But getting back to basics, what are the challenges for SMEs? And how does this technology then address the specific barriers to finance that SMEs face? And while there are many challenges that SMEs face in building their businesses. I focus here on 4. One is a lack of credit history. SMEs tend to be small. They may not have previously had an opportunity to borrow, and so they don't have a credit history that they can bank on. Also, as the governor mentioned, there's a lack of collateral. Another aspect is that for many banks, the cost of serving SMEs is high relative to the size of the loan or the size of the account. And so that product market fit of getting low-cost, efficient services to SMEs that will be viable at the size at the size of the transactions or the size of the loans that the SME needs. And finally, as was also mentioned, the typical small business may not have the same kinds of skills and resources in terms of being able to develop its budgeting, its business planning, having a good handle on its cash flows, and therefore is sometimes a challenge in terms of bankability. So, as we'll be discussing through the day, I think the advances in fintech are enabling banks and technology providers to address many of these questions. Alternative data, for example, can be a substitute for credit history. Traditional credit data is just one piece of a growing web of decision data that can be leveraged to score an individual or an SME. Alternatives to collateral are beginning to be formed. The governor mentioned invoice financing, digitization of invoices and other documentation, and digital tracking of physical assets creates an opportunity to leverage so many more different things in terms of collateral that can provide a basis for financing SMEs at lower risk. Then, of course, there's the cost to serve, and fintech lending is one example of how innovators have tried to address, through multiple dimensions of the lending process, the cost to serve and drive down the costs and increase the access, both through new funding mechanisms, automated customer service and acquisition, innovations in underwriting, and automating the customer service at the back end. These new platforms can reduce the cost of serving SMEs and deliver finance in a much more efficient and cost-effective way. Also, opportunities exist for banks to take these products and services online to disaggregate, modularize, and reconfigure their business processes to adopt these technologies for point solutions at different places in their business process, and therefore be able to drive down costs, improve productivity, and increase inclusivity. Finally, we're seeing a wave of fintechs who are providing non-financial services directly or sometimes via bank partners to improve SME bankability. These cut across cash flow and budgeting, accounting services, business planning, and so many other areas where SMEs need that improvement in skills and availability of data to help drive their bankability. So those are just some of the areas where I think we can engage in our discussion.
Obviously, a lot of great opportunities for SMEs to use these technologies, but also the financial services institutions who traditionally serve them to use them.
Absolutely. We're seeing some of these things being promulgated directly in a business-to-business mode of the SMEs, of the fintech trying to reach the SMEs, but increasingly recognition that banks have many of these customer relationships and banks wanting to bring these tools on board. So, for example, one of the ones that I had on there at Saal was founded in Poland and was using a distribution model of linking to banks to provide cash flow analytics that a bank could give to its customers through the bank's online banking portal, for example, for SMEs. And then that in turn allows the bank to have greater visibility to those cash flows and design funding products for the SME.
All right.
So improve the SME skills and provides an opportunity to fund.
So these technologies should actually be good news for the Thai SMEs, and I think we'll have Sarinee also talk about whether these technologies are able to finally resolve some of the long-standing problems which we have to SME credit in Thailand. Sarinee, your thoughts here?
Okay. So good morning, everyone. So it sounds very exciting, I think, all of this. And there's clearly nobody can deny the potential for fintech to help SMEs. I'd just like to set the stage a little bit about when we say SMEs in Thailand, what should we be looking at, right? So basically, there are only about 350,000 registered SMEs, so people who are actually registered as juristic persons in Thailand. But then if you look at all the research and the official numbers of who actually are operating as business, the number is a lot larger than the registered number. So I think upwards to 2.8 up to about 3 million SMEs in Thailand. So clearly a lot of these people still operate as solo entrepreneurs. So, or you can, there's a newer word that's called, I think the name is micro entrepreneurs. I think that's very interesting. Also, not to mention that a lot of farmers now in Thailand are actually seeing very different ways of farming than before. So they don't actually, I mean, it's no longer like a family or a business where you spend all of your effort on the farm, right? But a lot of people actually hire laborers. There's a term in Thailand called like mobile farming. So you just basically call up the laborers you want at the farming season, and then you have to do a lot of different non-farming jobs. So I think they're behaving more and more like a small, very small business owners. So micro-entrepreneurs, I think now many academics start to apply this term to farmers as well. So I think there's a huge range of SMEs in Thailand. And also I think last year TMB Analytics around May last year had a very interesting research. So they found that among the registered SMEs, so in other words the 340 or 350,000, only less than 2% are what they call cream SMEs. So these are the people with healthy profit margins. They have healthy debt to equity ratios, and they have a trend of growth of revenues. And so that's a very small number in terms of profitability. And if you look at the average income of these cream SMEs, they said it's only about 30 to 35 million baht, right? So it's a little more than $1 million only. So that really challenges, I think, the mindset and the framework of what we think about when we say SMEs, because I think traditionally different banks may have a higher, I think, threshold for when they say SMEs. So I think when we talk about these fintech solutions, we need to be able to apply it to the whole spectrum, right, of SMEs. And so I think the challenge is how to get the fintech providers and I think fintech, to me, it's not just financial institutions or even financial technology companies, but also traditional companies or non-bank players like e-commerce companies as well. So a lot of people have the potential to help. So what I think the challenge is how you go down the tail. So you don't just see the cream of the crop or the short tail or the biggest and most profitable SMEs that are suppliers of big companies, but how you go down to the long tail. I think that's where the potential for fintech is.
And I think that's a good point. The SME market has really broadened, but it also has changed, right? And therefore their requirements would have changed as well. And we'll address that in the next couple of sessions. Kun Patchara, your comments here, especially as Kasikorn Bank looks at your traditional SMEs, the cream of the crop that was earlier talked about, but also the changing behaviors of SME and the broader market of SMEs that we suddenly have now.
Yeah, just follow on to what Kun Sarinee is saying. The numbers of SMEs right now, our clients is probably around 1.5 million. So a lot of people thought that there aren't that many SMEs, but there actually is, and most of them are in the long tail. The problems that we've had before in terms of providing financial inclusivity is the other spectrum of financial inclusivity, which is overlending and picking the right person to lend to. That all comes back to the fact that we don't know who these SMEs are, especially on the long tail. Digital will help. No one has digital identification. I think 5 or 6 years ago, everybody just relies on the fact that here, I'll just borrow from my friends because he knows me, and my bank actually knows me, but we don't know him that well. We don't know him that well because, actually I have slides. We don't know him, but are these my slides? Anyway, I'll just go through quickly. Here you go. This is what I was saying in terms of before. It's mostly outside the banks. That's actually been providing the source of funds just because personal relationships. The banks are trying to do more in terms of here we know how money flows and we think that we know you, but in the end, the problem we have right now with lending to SMEs derives from two things. First, we don't know what they're going to do with the money that they borrow from us. And the second is we don't know whether they'll be willing to pay or not willing, whether they will be able to pay us back or not. So that's the main struggle that we have right now. So out of the 1.5 million we talked about, so far we've been able to penetrate about 12% of that in terms of providing meaningful lending. I think where we should be able to do better is this page here, where if we could get more help from the fintech in terms of user behavior and data analytics, that's going to be where the big help are. As I was saying before, digital identification will provide us with better understanding. So in the future, hopefully we don't have to rely so much on how they access banks and the money that only flows through the banks as our only means of validating the ability to repay. In the past, we've been doing a lot. These are some of the names of the fintechs that we've begun sharing data with. They have helped. Over the past, we have been able to understand our clients better, but we're still pretty prudent in a sense of how fast we're lending to these people. The last page here, what I'm trying to do is I sort of identified various different groups of SMEs by grouping them into 4 groups. First is wholesalers and lenders. Second one provides services. The third one provide manufacturers. And the last one is the agriculture groups that Sarinee was referring to before. And these are where most of the fintechs will be able to help in terms of providing better productivity to the SMEs and eventually improve some of the country's GDPs.
Right, thanks. So our capabilities to really understand the SMEs and a bigger SME market has really expanded, right? And we'll talk later about the best practices in trying to work with the fintech companies to know our customers much better. And that's something that we will have as a key discussion in today's panel. So Sopnendu would have been exposed to all these technologies, and he's better placed than anyone in this room to talk about the new technologies that are emerging in order for us to improve the way that we serve SMEs.
Thank you. I have only one slide, okay. I just summed up all this thing that they spoke about in one slide. I think the governor gave us a great word to start with called immunity. I'm kind of fascinated by that word. I think, in fact, I hope the next 1 year of my public speaking will be around immunity only, not of inclusivity. I think that's a great way to start this discussion today because there are some real challenges. I have been looking at this space for 3 years, and there are opportunities and there are challenges, some reality. And let me focus on some of the reality of this, of where we are in the whole space of fintech, particularly for the SME. So if you frame the problem statement, and let's look from the lens of an SME. I need a bank account. If I'm a small SME, I need access to kickstart my business, some finance. I need access to my ecosystem. I need access to marketplace. I need access to growth capital once I do relatively good business. Now, if you take along these 5 lenses, there are challenges in each of this, under each of this point. We do see a lot of alternate capital coming through the platforms, what we have in through equity funding, to investment, invoice financing, but there is still long way to go because a lot of these platforms require data. And SMEs by design today don't create a lot of digital data because they're still transiting from a physical world to a digital world. So the platform which exists today doesn't really provide that opportunity. So you have to rely on a lot of alternate data set which may not be providing that immune system what government is requiring from this ecosystem. So to build that, I think we need to build what we call as an inclusive marketplace, a digital platform which allows all these players to connect. Whether you are a lending platform, whether you are providing accounting and bookkeeping applications like Xero of Australia, what they've done a remarkable job there, or you are putting the digital payment infrastructure and e-invoicing and all this as part of the ecosystem. Because if I'm a small SME, I must have a digital platform to hook into. Once I get into the platform, I must be able to see where can I get my money. I must be able to see which software I can connect to do my accounting. I must be able to see how should I do my digital payment. How can I digitize my e-invoicing? They must have that single platform to connect. And this is perhaps a national initiative, maybe a public utility from the country to build together. Because these are the must-have, almost like the base infrastructure which doesn't exist in any country today. Now let's talk about the underlying technology, because you can have the best AI, but it doesn't have access to data, it's not going to work. And I make a joke, most of the data are actually small data. And in fact, the new AI engine is working on small data, not on the big data. So how do you unlock this big data out of the small data is what is a big challenge out there. Hopefully, by putting this platform in place, we should create a lot of direct, indirect data set, which allows us to bring the power of fintech together. I want to end this opening with two blue round thing out there, policy harmonization, because this is where policymakers have to play a significant role. We have spoken in many forums, all this application is going to run cloud. Country must have a clear cloud computing guidelines. I've been telling for the last 2 years, we're still struggling out there. Countries must have a strong policy around data residency, around data creation, privacy data, what data we can use, because these are key components for making this work. Third, the whole KYC process. Onboarding a company to a bank is really a big challenge, because onboarding an individual perhaps less complex, but when you onboard a company, it takes so much of effort to get these companies to a bank account. It's not a fun to have. You're going to ask any SME to give them a bank account is a real challenge. Lastly, I think the regulators have talked about the sandbox. Look for a killer app. Look for a killer application. Bring them to the regulatory sandbox. Test out every component, what we talked about today, and see whether they're going to really make the real change we're looking for. Lastly, in the world of globalization and connectivity, we need a global connectivity platform. We need a Thai marketplace platform connecting to an Indonesia marketplace platform, to a Singapore marketplace platform, to an India marketplace platform. We need to build that global connectivity, and that can only come from three things: common cloud computing guidelines, common data residency guidelines, and third, APIs. They are the key part to this whole connectivity. We must have standards to connect all the ecosystem players to a common platform.
Okay, thank you very much, Sopnendu. So you talked about the creation and the need for a data platform that everyone can share data to, but also acquire data from. Noting that there is such a broad market of SMEs in Thailand, there seems to be a long tail issue that we're also facing. Will the contribution of SMEs to this platform be primarily done through the bigger SMEs rather than the long tail that seems to be emerging and also might be underserved at this point?
I think I saw a couple of new platforms coming out. I think that when we talk of platform, if I'm an SME, I need to buy the cheapest mode of travel for my staff. Do I have those travel services connected to the platform? I need to find short-term liquidity. Is my data available for a bank to look at? There's a whole set of lifestyle of an SME which has to be captured by connecting to the digital partner of equivalent services. I need a small a space in the platform to build my own employee portal, because there are a whole set of lifestyle activity and a SME gets into it, and that needs a collective public utility. So I keep on emphasizing, this is not a fintech player's job to build a national platform for SME. This is a public utility, it's a public good, because almost like you are moving your SME from physical, the old-fashioned, you put a big space, make it a export zone and put a lot of building, go and sit there. We have to create a new digital equivalent of that national platform where we can bring every possible player, create a secured, trusted data source, then pump them with fintech companies, banks to fund this opportunity.
Yeah, so let's have the bank speak for the banking industry. Patchara, unfortunately, you're the only financial services institution represented here in the panel. Your ability to be a great participant of this platform, that will serve our SMEs moving forward. How will K-Bank address this opportunity?
Well, we try to do our best
Yeah,
in terms of making sure that all the transactional data had gone from physical over to digital, but obviously it's not easy. You know, we've started QR as one of the means of payments, I think probably 3 months ago, right after we got out of the sandbox. And it has not been easy. It has not been easy in terms of everyone is so used to using cash as means of payments to switch them on to something else, which is obviously more convenient. We actually gave them money to actually try this new thing. But again, to change people's behavior and create this big platform where everyone can have data and digital identity.
Sure. It's going to be a huge task, obviously, and maybe we need to break down the requirement to create a data platform by looking at what is going to be continuing to be a big problem for SMEs in Thailand, which would still be working capital. So if we are going to work on that objective, to resolve the working capital issue of Thai's SMEs, that will hopefully be able to fast track certain things, but also let us prioritize on building this platform. Kun Sarinee, your comments here. The persistent problem of working capital for SMEs in Thailand, how will this be resolved by maybe the data platforms, but also other solutions?
So frankly, when you say data platform, it's a little bit over my head because it's a very big word. So I'd like to talk about, so from the perspective of SMEs, right? So I think there are two key challenges. So on the front end, let's say on the front end when they sell stuff, and on the back end. So the back end is when they manage their company. So I think on the front end, I think there's a clear opportunity. We see it more and more. SMEs, especially newer ones, start to sell products and goods online. So I think this is there are a lot of Instagram sellers now in Thailand. There are also more SMEs who are familiar with the internet and see that as a channel for sales and distribution, so to speak. So for those entrepreneurs who sell directly, I think to customers, I think there's a real opportunity for having something like peer-to-peer lending, as in the models of many different countries, like Cabbage, for example, in the US. So they use alternative data. So you hook up to the system, they take your transactions data from Amazon and your accounting information from QuickBook or whatever, and then they can really calculate the credit score and give you loans. So I think that if we were to do something like that in Thailand, it's possible, but I think the value proposition to the SMEs have to be very clear. I think now that brings me to the connection to the back end, to the management of their business. So a lot of SMEs are still very, so some people may say that they lack the knowledge. I think that's true, but also there's also deeper problem of lacking trust or awareness of how all of this can really help their business, right? So a lot of SMEs still have multiple books, or they are very wary about, very cost conscious, right? And so they try to, find all the ways they can manage their taxes. You know what I mean? So they have this kind of reluctance already to, wait, if I'm hooking up my books to this digital platform, am I going to be taxed more? And things like that. So I think the value proposition has to be made very clear. And if they can see that, okay, by basically coming online and having more this data to the platform will help them access more capital, right? And access to capital, I think, is also not an automatic thing. I think fintech players need to be also, basically they need to see, how they actually can go to the long tail. It's not just something that can happen. So invoice financing, supply chain financing, peer-to-peer lending, I think all of this can be done, but it needs to be communicated very clearly to create real incentives for SME to get, to digitize or to get involved in the data platform. Because I like Sopnendu when he said small data. I've also been using this word a lot, but in Thailand I actually say, in many spaces we don't even have small data, so we have no data.
Micro data.
So it's like, how do we get from no data to small data, and then we can have big
data platform.
Right, and I think also I agree with the role of the government. I think especially if you look at APIs and open banking, for example, I think it's really exciting, but it's not something that people would just, suddenly sit up and say, okay, let's open up our, data to everybody to use, right? I think talking about big banks as well. So I think there are many interesting alternatives of how people are doing it. Like in the Europe, for example, I think I think maybe we can discuss more on the.
And Euro is a bad example.
Yes.
Yeah, like European, for example. Okay, so I think as of the beginning of this year, if I understand correctly, if you operate financial institutions in Europe, you have to, right? You have to open up. You have to write APIs. You have to open up your backdoor to basically third-party providers to allow access for fintech companies. So this is what's happening in Europe. I think that different countries have their own industry working group on open banking. And so I think that would be interesting to see how that plays out. And of course, all of this openness needs to come with sufficient protection, right? So it's a protection of what? Protection of data security, protection of privacy, and that's always going to be a kind of another side of the coin.
The question of open APIs really gets to who owns the data and who should be able to determine how it's used. And in the past, the bank with the core relationship with a customer would have had the data, the non-credit data around financial transactions. So credit data might be reported to the bureau or the registry and therefore socialized to some extent with the other players in the industry and others who want to extend credit. But the other transaction data, which is quite significant, and we're learning more and more how to use it. That data, which ultimately is a reflection of cash flows, it may also be a reflection of behaviors, and that can be used increasingly for credit scoring in ways that had not previously been explored or previously been possible. So that's a data that only the bank with the relationship, that has the demand deposit account, for example, would have that data. And the open banking approach says, let's allow others to access that, or really let's allow the consumer, or the customer, the SME or the consumer, to own that data and determine who else gets to use it and create it more portability over to other players. That creates much more competition, much more ability for a wider variety of people to serve that customer and leverage that data. But in that line, I think if you combine those two things, you don't need to create a separate national infrastructure for a platform for the data. The banks already are such a platform. If they can be linked to other players through an open API or some kind of data sovereignty for the individual, then you have actually the effects that Sopnendu has talked about in terms of allowing multiple parties to offer different types of services and leverage the data that's coming alongside them. So I'm not quite convinced that we need to create government infrastructures here, but I'd focus on creating greater flexibility and interoperability of the different data platforms that already exist.
So what you're advocating is guidelines on data control, ownership, utilization, as well as access to that data. Right?
Access in particular to leverage the existing data platforms that are already there, inherent in the banks themselves, in the other platforms and services that are being used. And just in terms of one other comment, I think very good point made about the concerns that an SME will have about formalization. And does formalization mean that I'm going to be taxed more? And that interplay between greater visibility through digitization, which puts the information someplace where others can potentially access it, and whether the tax authorities have that access or not depends. But I think we really need to recognize that in any of these discussions around formalization, it's always been the case that individuals and small businesses need to understand the benefits that they get from being more formalized, as well as the obligations and costs that may incur. And if the benefits are greater, then people will move forward, and the digitization is the same. So if digitization gives them access to finance, for example, the point of sale is a clear point where cash is often a way to avoid recording as many of the transactions or the revenues. But if use of point of sale digitization creates a data footprint that then creates access to working capital, that trade-off shifts. And the SME then may be more willing to digitize and formalize and recognize more of that revenue if that recognition of the revenue patterns and those cash flows enables them to access working capital.
Sure. Sopnendu would have comments.
I think 3-4 points. I think I agree with Matt that we don't necessarily need a public platform, but today the reality is that in absence of a public platform, we have created monopolistic giant in few countries.
Sure.
Look at what happened. The government has no recourse on this huge monopolistic, massive platform, dominating market. And if they start using data the wrong way, we have no recourse. So that's the worry of government not intervening in this common data platform, because there's huge policy challenges which governments are struggling to build around data. None of them have solved for, one. Second thing, I think we go back to this whole transparency and transaction. Governor spoke about the immunity, back to that topic again. Because one piece we don't talk about SMEs. SMEs are vulnerable to two things. They're vulnerable to a lot of risk. They have a small SME owner works for the rest of the life. They don't have a retirement. So there is two significant fintech gap out there: sustainable pension plans, sustainable insurance, because this don't exist today. So that's again bring back to my core point, because unless you create digital data, which creates digital behavior, we cannot build this immune system which allow this vulnerable SME to be protected through micro insurance or micro pension plan. Again, there's a role of government to ensure these platforms are put. There's a lot of capital required. I don't see in near future, unless a big giant with well-funded machinery comes and builds it. Of course, that's a choice country can make.
Okay. Maybe Patchara? Yes.
Just on the other side of open KPI and sharing data, from the side of a client myself, it's my data. As a bank, I can't just giving your data to a whole bunch of other operators. Right. So I think a lot of people keep saying that, hey, let's do open API, let's do open network, but in the end,
what should be the governance around this?
I think that's what I suggested, because banks are more comfortable. There's a I don't want to use Singapore example. That's but I think we struggle also in Singapore. Eventually, we have to build a national platform called MyInfo, where everybody who contributes to the data are able to share in a trusted ecosystem, because I authorize my data sharing, which is captured by a trusted data source, as captured trusted data platform. Banks are protected. I am protected. I know whom I'm giving my data. There's a clear consent architecture. That's what I think directionally has been working. Different market, different opportunity. I can't say about that for everybody.
Yeah, so I think that's why there needs to be a slew of, guidelines and regulations. I mean, surrounding the use of data. I totally agree about consent. So open APIs must be, I think consent has to be a default, right? So people have to be consent to what data they're going to give to the providers, and they need to also know, right, exactly what kinds of data are being collected, and what would be the use of data. Data needs to, I think there's a lot of already international standards surrounding this, right? Sure. But in Thailand, so where we are is we don't even have the national, personal data protection law. So we don't have that. We don't have the equivalent of, for example, the Fair Credit Reporting law, the US. We don't have the Equal Credit Opportunity law that will basically try to make sure that credit access is fair. So I think there are a lot of work to be done still on surrounding the use, the collection, and the use of data, including alternative algorithms for credit.
So if I were an SME now, should I start to share my data in Thailand?
I think it depends on to whom, right?
Right.
Well, I think she made a very good point before I forget. Right. Because one of the things we are seeing a trend is called exclusivity through data. More I know about you, less most likely I'm going to give you credit. That's where government has to come and build a fair data credit policy, because you may end up in the whole madness of digitization, you are not able to socialize risk anymore. Okay. So how do the cost of credit will go up in a different way, because I know so much thing about you. Sure.
Just one more thing about accountability as well, right? So right now the use and the collection of data, I think in Thailand is still not transparent, and also there's not enough accountability. So if there's data breach, personal data breach, first of all, as a customer, will I even know about it? You may not even know about this, and then there's no, nobody is penalized, or there's no court cases or whatever. So I think this is whole spectrum surrounding data.
Right. I think, Patchara, how does this get resolved in the financial services, traditional financial services?
That's why I think it's just a whole bunch, not a whole bunch, that sounds bad, but conceptually it sounds good. Okay. But, every time I open a KPI, let's say I have 8 million or so digital identity clients, I can't just go ask them every time whether, you would consent to me giving your data to a whole bunch of other partners. So So in the end, we've tried to open APIs to larger partners to try to make sure where we've come up with some sort of better credit predictability so that we can provide more lending. We've tried opening data rooms, blacking out certain data sets, and then work together. But again, we need sort of like, a middle person to sort of referee the whole thing.
Sure.
Well, usually these things are done by consent, right? So the model and the approach that's being taken in Europe is that if I as a customer want to engage with some new fintech, it's either customer who gives the permission, but then my bank has to allow, based on my permission, the fintech to access that data. Similarly, in most markets where there's a credit bureau call of some kind, that's done by the permission in the application process, right? The individual or the SME applies for credit and gives permission to go and call on a third party, data processor or provider to go and check my data, wherever that may be. So I think there are already models that exist for managing some of these things. The governance does become a little bit more complex. I think the more interesting and challenging piece is on the economics of it. If you as a bank have invested in systems and customer acquisition and the KYC to bring me on board, and over time you've gathered all that data about where I spend and what I spend and the flows on my debit card and what came in and out of my bank account, but you've invested in that. It's my data, but you've spent money and resources to develop that data. How do you get compensated when I then go and say, well, I want to use that data someplace else?
We're sharing people.
Pardon?
We're sharing people.
Well, that's great. But ultimately, and if it's going to be sustainable, and if people are still going to invest in developing and gathering that data about me and onboarding me in the first place, we're going to have to find some way to make sure that you get compensated over time.
Right. Patchara talked about the creation of a governance framework or some principles of the use of data that we have of our customers. What are you looking for from the regulators in terms of facilitating this, but also making sure that the governance is right?
I think authentication is probably authentication, verification of self is first and foremost right now. The other thing is, again, eKYC is another way for which we can re-engage our existing clients to make sure that if they are fully consented to me allowing other people to use the data.
Right. Okay.
That's certainly one of the key areas that we've seen. Something I want to comment as well. The IFC and Monetary Authority of Singapore and others and ASEAN Bankers Association, represented here as well, have gathered together to create the ASEAN Financial Innovation Network, AFIN, which is an industry sandbox. And one of the key applications that the banks have told us they want to see in terms of fintech connectivity is around KYC and customer onboarding.
So let me, from a regulatory perspective, frame this into two parts. There's a piece of regulatory requirement to identify a SME. There's a role of regulator to identify what are the attributes, digital attributes we must have to onboard an SME. Then come two parts. As an SME, I procure things, I sell things. Now both the leg must have electronic payment. And both the leg must have some kind of e-invoicing standardized by the government in some sense, because I think Thailand has done the whole payment piece. Then comes the actual invoicing piece, which has to have some standard structure, some kind of central utility. Once you have those two pieces, and the last leg is the whole, your own credit, Matt spoke about the whole credit bureau data. So that gives the behavior side of your engagement. If you have all these pieces together, I think the underlying, which comes as funding the growth capital, funding the risk side, will be far more simpler. Okay. But this needs a lot of digital journey to be created, and it needs a lot of capital to provide that infrastructure. It's not easy for the banks, not easy for the fintech to go on their own on this whole journey.
Right. You also mentioned KYC as part of the
stack. It's almost identity stack, consent, then the whole infrastructure of exchanging data through common data portals.
Sure. There was one question here on the app asking you to explain data residency requirements. Why is that a very big
I think my sense is that because eventually we are going to be globally connected. And if that is true, for the SMEs to grow beyond their domestic boundary, we need to start using cross-border data. Then comes the whole AI engine, which runs on cross-border data. There's a AML, governor spoke about AML, CFT, the whole cross-border implication. So that needs a strong understanding of what data resides where, what data is allowed cross-border, what data needs to be anonymized, and it needs a lot of coordinated policy action to get it right.
What is Singapore doing in this space?
I think we have been very liberal in our data policy. We have allowed data to stay wherever they need to stay, as long as you follow certain guidelines. So we published a data guidelines, we published a outsourcing guidelines, we have published our cloud computing guidelines. I think we hope that journey takes place further by bilaterally or multilaterally connecting to each other. And there's a talk of a global sandbox happening, and I'm flying to London in a few hours. We'll talk about it, how that helps from a global context.
Okay, Matthew.
And I think we have to recognize that it's not just the individuals or businesses that are seeking to act cross-border. It's that some of the skills and capabilities may be from a different country or from a different location. It's that some of the infrastructure may be scaled better on a regional or global basis. So, for example, maybe there's a fintech that's doing some really interesting things in terms of data scoring that they sit in London. They're not going to be that skill. That skill is a team that's developed some new proprietary algorithms and data processing. First of all, they're tuning that using data from many different countries potentially, and second of all, they're not going to go and be resident or set up separately in every different country that might find use in terms of inclusivity, in terms of immunity. In applying those new technologies. So to cut yourself off from that because the data from our citizens would have to go to London to be processed seems to be a self-defeating kind of approach. So certainly that aspect of it, plus the scalability element, and we're seeing this increasingly. We talk to banks who say, look, our fintech competitors can scale their infrastructure at an almost infinitesimal basis using cloud computing, but I'm a regulated bank, and my regulator, I'm not saying this country, but in the region, my regulator doesn't allow me to use cloud-based infrastructure. I'm stuck with high-cost, unvariable infrastructure that I need to support. How can I compete against these other service providers? So from every aspect, it's really important to be able to figure out what are the key issues in terms of deploying that new technology. And if it's about privacy, then let's make sure that the standards of privacy are there, but the data can be resident someplace else. Or if it's about the cloud-based infrastructure, some of the regulators have expressed concern, for example, can they access that in the event of an intervention, right? And then if you peel it back, you say, well, how would you access the data center if you intervened in a bank today? Well, either the IT personnel of the bank are cooperating with the intervention, or they're not. If they're not cooperating, they can probably erase it easier if it's localized than if it was sitting on the cloud maintained with backups by IBM or Amazon. So where are you really getting to? You really have to cut away the different issues and move away some of the emotional pieces and look at the specific issues that you're trying to address. Is it privacy? Is it ability to access in the event of a regulatory need to intervene in a bank, and so on, and then peel away each of the issues underneath those. And I think in most cases we'll find that a well-articulated outsourcing policy and a well-articulated privacy policy will cover a lot of the issues.
So it's good that we're starting to talk about that, and there are, of course, some initiatives that I am aware of that would hopefully be able to allow us to build that data platform in due course. Let's go to another key capability that we're starting to talk about, which is helping our SMEs be more bankable, or helping their capability. And I think this is also reflected in one of the questions that was raised here. What is the role of the central bank and the regulators in being able to help our SMEs scale up, right? Or skill up, if we're playing around with words. But Matthew, your comments here.
Well, again, I'm not sure that this is particularly a central bank function. I think facilitating education and certainly financial literacy and the associated skill building is something that could cut across different institutions within a society. It might be for something that happens in the education. It might be something that happens with the Ministry of Commerce. But certainly, it's an important piece, and it's something where the the public sector can play a role in terms of helping to build that financial literacy and creating the safe environment in which it can operate. But I think there's an awful lot of private sector activity that's happening. Zero was mentioned. That was one of little logos on my slide. But there's a range of providers who are seeking to help SMEs. I think the banks can play a role here too, recognizing that their core skill set may not be in terms of educating and building skills, but they can be that facilitating platform. They have the customer relationships, and they have the ability to make that open, or at least to plug in with new capabilities that can serve the SMEs.
Sarinee, the skilling up needs to be a concerted effort, including the regulators, but also the banks.
I agree with Kun Matthew that the central bank's role is more like facilitating, and I think the central bank's role is also to open up the field as wide as possible, because people who can be involved, it's not just banks anymore. It's not just fintech. It could also be companies. It could be, for example, big companies who want to finance their suppliers, reliable suppliers, for example. It could be everyday people. If I, for example, love some boutique hotels, I should be able to lend money to the hotels that had great ratings on different travel sites. So I think the field has to be very open to everyone. But definitely, I agree with all the, minimum requirements and the guidelines have to be very clear on data, issues surrounding data privacy and all that. I think another issue that is very important is that when we say SME education or financial literacy or consumer education, my feeling is that too much emphasis has been placed on the people themselves or the SME. It's like it's your job to be educated, or like it's the SME's job to get educated. I think that because of all these fintech, there's much more opportunity to smarter ways to educate them. Like basically, how do you use these technologies to activate their capacities or to get them, as Kun Matthew used the word formalization. I think that's
providing tools.
Exactly, providing tools to help. And that's going to be part of this, what I say, a value proposition, to get them on board. So I think when, to all the people who think about education, I think that it's time to kind of maybe move beyond sort of, like educating, but how do you create better tools and how do you really use those tools to increase capacity of people? There are lots of great, for example, financial literacy tools that are really easy to use, and basically it's almost automatic in terms of what it wants you to do.
Patchara first, I'm sure that you have.
I think it's a reach problem. A reach problem meaning that there's a ton of great apps out there improving productivity for SMEs and whatnot. The problem is that these apps, they can't sell themselves. They need people explaining what these things are. If you take out the digital natives who can find information for themselves, they're going to need salespeople to go explain what these things are. And I think that over the past couple of years, we've helped fulfill that role. A lot of fintech has come to us and say, here, we've got great apps here who can help on accounting, on HR, on inventory and whatnot. Here, take us to see your clients. And I think I encourage a lot of the other banks would do the same to their SME customers.
Is that offered as a service, meaning you make revenues out of it, or it's just really? We
don't make anything. It's just a service to us. But indirectly, we want them to be more productive. Otherwise, they can't service our loans. But the problem that these apps, these fintechs, they have to deal with is that cost to entry has to be low. A lot of times we find that once they come to us, they meaning the fintechs, they would expect to be made whole or made profits on the first day, which obviously is a bit complicated.
Right. Okay, Matthew.
I think it's great that a bank is facilitating these kinds of things, and ultimately, if the SME becomes more bankable and you can lend more and more profitably and control the risk better, then everybody wins. I think one of the things that was raised before in terms of the corporate side, which hasn't been as much represented on this panel, and hopefully it will be over the course of these 2 days, corporate anchors can play an important role in invoicing systems, in working capital provision, and trying to figure out how to link into those can be an important role for banks. It can be an important role for there's opportunities for fintechs. When you have the supply chain anchors, there isn't always an invoice on every side. The restaurant may have an invoice relationship with its supplier for raw materials. It's not going to invoice its customers unless it's in the catering business, in which case, then it could have an invoicing relationship. But certainly, there are anchors in certain points of the supply chain who can play an important role in helping to digitize both downstream and upstream, and facilitating that through bank relationships, through fintech relationships, can be play an important role in further digitizing and formalizing many of these SMEs.
All right.
I think I have 4 points. As a central bank, they must look at what stops the SME to get a bank account. What are the barriers? If there are barriers in onboarding customers, they must work with the bank to facilitate that piece. The second piece, the cost of payment is still very high for SMEs. I think he made a great point of going there, doing an outreach, talk to the merchants, help them to onboard, talk to fintech, reduce the cost of the equipments we are using for electronic payment. And third, I think this is where I think we have a lot of work to do, how to provide them that immunity they're looking for, the micro insurance, the micro pension plan, long-term societal impact, because if SMEs are going to generate 80% of the employment, they can't work rest of their life to give that employment. They need to retire. They need to have that pension plan because that doesn't exist today. And that is going to be a big time bomb hitting Asia in particular because we rely on SME for creating jobs. And we have not done a great job of providing that insurance.
Sure, right. Which brings us to the close of this panel, but I'd like to close with a fundamental question about whether, as an SME, it is a very hopeful time in our industry. With all these fintech developments, with all this concerted effort to build data platforms, governance standards around data privacy, utilization, as well as access, has there been a better time to be an SME in Thailand, Sopnendu?
Absolutely, great time to be SME because I think this is a time to scale faster, access capital. I think Thailand is perfectly ready for leapfrogging the whole thing.
Very good, yeah. Kun Patchara?
Agree.
Right. Okay.
He has a big job to do.
I know, yeah. And Kun Sarinee?
I think that is a great time, but it's also a kind of a time where a lot more people need to look at it more seriously as well. We can't confuse, for example, we cannot confuse the lack of trust for the lack of education. I think the lack of trust is a real issue. And I think it needs to be addressed, and I think more and more people need to understand really what the SMEs, what their pain points are, and how to really propose a direct and clear value proposition, because each sector is going to be different.
I grew up in an SME. My parents had a small business. I typed invoices on my summer vacations. The scale of things that you can do as an SME today, the connectivity that you can achieve to localized markets, global markets, is just unprecedented. So it's a great time to be creating businesses, and hopefully many of those in the room today will help facilitate those businesses to succeed.
A very good way to close our panel. Thank you so much for your time, our panelists, and also hope that we all found this discussion very fruitful. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, all the panelists, for the informative session. And it was a fruitful conversation around regarding SMEs, opportunities and challenges.
ครับขอขอบพระคุณท่านผู้เสวนาทุกท่านนะครับและลำดับต่อไปครับขอเรียนเชิญทุกท่านพักเบรกและรับประทานอาหารว่างสักครู่นะครับซึ่งเราได้จัดไว้ให้แล้วครับบริเวณชั้น 2 และชั้น 5 ข้างหน้าห้องนี้เองครับแล้วกลับมาพบกันอีกครั้งนะครับเวลา 10:50 น.ตรงครับ
So let's take a short break. We have the refreshment available outside on the 2nd and 5th floor. We'll get back again at 10:50. 10:50. Thank you.